We're live.
Here we are. Well, thanks for doing this with me. So Callie is a friend of mine, and wanted to bring him on to talk to you guys about just various things. So I'll let him tell you a little bit about himself to get this thing started.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I've been listening to the podcast for a really long time, and then we've kind of intersected in a couple of different ways, and so it's kind of exciting for me to be on. But yeah, so my background is a little different. So my family, we've been in manufacturing for a really long time, but most of the people in my family have art degrees. So I grew up like making art, making things, going to shows, that kind of stuff, but also in this kind of hardcore manufacturing realm. And so after doing and trying my hands at a few different things, web design, you know, software programming, I ended up getting sucked into the family business, and I got into product development. And it's an interesting intersection of what I like, which is creating and making. So it uses that engineer side of my brain, and it uses that artist side of my brain. That's why I formed this company, Red Blue Collective, because it's that dichotomous thinking. I think a lot of pieces of life are like this: is that there's two elements, and it's tempting to think that they're mutually exclusive, but they're additive together. So Red Blue Collectives, it's like how we come up with interesting ideas and we offer them. So yeah.
Cool. So you I don't know if you want to share this or not, but do you still do graffiti? I know you have some graffiti background, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of I was keeping my business and graffiti life like completely separate. It was this alter ego thing, and only
Yeah.
recently at 40, I think at 45, 46, I was like, fuck it, man. If they find out I'm a graffiti writer and they don't want to work with me, then that's cool, you know. So if you want to tread lightly, whatever. But I know you do have a
Um,
graffiti background, so just maybe
yeah.
want to share whatever you're comfortable with.
Well, I mean, if anybody's seen my podcast, you see the title, and I just wrote it. And if for anybody that knows me in real life, they'll see my handwriting, and they're like, it looks like, it looks like somebody that, you know, does graffiti. But yeah. So it's really, it's really interesting for me because I have this really distinct memory of being a sophomore in high school and seeing somebody work in their black book, and I was like, wow, what is this guy doing? Because I wanted to be a comic book illustrator, and I would just spend all day drawing superheroes and cities and all that stuff, kind of teenage boy stuff. And then I saw this guy, and he had his characters and he had his his letters, and I was like, this is really cool. This is like multiple things that I like doing. And I got into it, and at the time in the 90s, it's not like you could just pull it up on the internet and who's into this and what's this. So my circle is pretty small, and exposure is pretty small because you couldn't like order magazines or anything like connecting with the culture would be difficult. But I really enjoyed it, and there's a lot of the concepts of it, of like getting something done and practicing something over and over and over again, and like having to learn, like you come across snippets of information of how to do something or how something should look. And I don't know, just the idea of putting yourself out there to impress a bunch of people semi-anonymously. I don't, just doing something to do it, right? I like that. But now I'm going to be 40 this year. It's just the aesthetic is what really brings me back to it. And the concept that I think that art in large is communication. It's us telling a story, right? So we're trying to evoke an emotion or tell a story. And when we write our name, it's like bringing that power of ourselves into the universe. So it's kind of a woo-woo thing, but it's a very simple story. Like, I was here, right? It's the most basic. I think 20,000 years ago, the first time somebody ever wrote anything, it was a story of them existing. And that's kind of what I love about it. It's as basic as it can be and as elaborate as you want it to be. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I was actually thinking about that, and I've talked about this at some point. I can't remember. I think I did talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but I came to this realization a while ago that like the first art ever created was kind of graffiti, you know, cave paintings, and so and then sort of got into digging around, and I was like, well, what else is there? And so like it turns out like it was all kinds of graffiti that the Romans did, and there was like Vikings doing graffiti. And
Mhm.
I told a quick story about a photo that I found about a Viking who etched his name. I think it was in a church, and now, can you imagine, like, if some graffiti writer caught a scribe in a church, you know, it would be like, oh my God, it's sacrilege, you know, or whatever. But now there's like ropes around it, and there's a little plaque that says, you know, this was like Hav's dad or whatever the fuck his name was, you know, like
Yeah,
on. And so it's like this now became this thing. So it's kind of interesting when you think about graffiti now, you know, there's people that are more accepting of it, but then there's also the people that just hate it and they see it as like a blight on the city, which I see both sides and I understand both sides. I happen to have my own opinion, obviously, but I never discount when people say, you know, you're fucking up my city or, you know, whatever. I understand. Yeah, that's cool. You know, I see it a little different, but at the same time, it's like that. I wonder when that mindset happened because obviously, like if you're cave people and you go into a cave and there's a bunch of like animals and shit written, they probably weren't having that same feeling like, these fucking kids drawing these wildebeests or whatever the fuck is on the wall, you know?
hey, you're
So,
sorted. You know, like look at this guy with this spear. Like, this is you know this isn't an accurate
yeah.
thing. Yeah, you're fucking
Yeah.
up my cave world. Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. I just yeah I enjoy that story element of it, and the Viking thing. That's just funny shit. But I yeah, I think of this as like even the vocabulary around it. I still find really interesting. Like oh, getting up. It's like just being seen. Like you're just it's an intent to be seen. It's an intent to like have that little piece of power or showmanship like over a USPS box or a wall or a whatever it is. So I, I find that ultimately interesting, and I find that a lot of art they're really just trying to do the same thing. It's like sort of around around telling a more complex story of identity. But from an aesthetic standpoint, I still really enjoy it, and I see more and more things in like mainstream culture pulling that type of aesthetic, or I guess cyclically trying to pull the aesthetic and making it like legit or whatever they want. And I don't want to get into a rabbit hole of like, but of talking about murals versus graffiti and like that whole split of things. But I think Instagram has pushed that whole mural concept beyond the pale, to a point of ridiculousness. But I don't know. I do just enjoy seeing art around, art around a city, and maybe what I think is art and what other people think is art is maybe a little different. But
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting thing. It's sort of like there was this artist that used to come to our studio, and she was like, I really hated graffiti until I started coming here, and then I started getting an appreciation for it. But she used to get really mad and like post on these Facebook groups, like post a picture of a bunch of tags on a dumpster and be complaining about it, and then and she said something really interesting. She was like, since I started coming here and I was talking to you and getting an understanding and seeing these kids coming in and drawing in the black books, like now I understand it better. So when I see it, it doesn't make me mad anymore. I actually appreciate it. And she's like, I even like that. And she pointed at this wood thing that we just let anybody catch tags on. So a lot of times people will come in and they'll buy a mean streak and they'll be like, oh, can I catch a tag right here? So it's just like what would the equivalent of say like a dumpster in the middle of the city where they never buff it, so there's just like layers and layers and layers of tags and drippers and all kinds of shit on it. She's like, I even like what that looks like now, and it's like a different perception, whereas so I guess it can change, but yeah, I do think like you said, the perception of what art is, it's kind of interesting to hear, people's perception of that, you know.
Sure. Yeah, and it kind of borderlines on craft as well. And when people see craft, they'll look at something and say like, "Oh, it's just this. Like it's just them using this pen and writing out these letters." And it's like, well, try it. Like just try it. And it's like when people look at the CNC machining that we do, or they look at somebody running a loom, right? They're like, oh, it's just this piece of machine that they're doing, and that's creating it. And then when they become a part of that culture and they start appreciating it, like how difficult it is to make that item, and all of the care and attention and practice and work that goes into developing even the aesthetic and the execution of it, then they're like, ooh, look at that.
Yeah.
It really adds this dimension and volume to it that you wouldn't get otherwise. But I don't know. I just look at it, and if I see a table that has layers and layers of tags on it, I think, man, that's great. It's like
Yeah.
a touchstone for a community.
Yeah, I would think that people see, and I don't know much about this, how the machines work, but I've seen videos and like the machine's basically cutting shit and drilling and it's doing all this stuff, but and
Yeah.
people probably think like, oh, well, that's easy. The machine just does that whole shit, but they don't know that you guys have to do all kinds of shit to tell the machine exactly what to do and how things fit together. And so
Yeah.
it's probably a parallel with how graffiti is. It's, well, I guess kind of, right? Is that kind of what you were
Well,
saying to a
yeah,
certain degree?
I'm just saying that people look at something and they discount it as not art because it's not like an oil painting, or they think like, hey, it's just an outside, it's just an outsider perspective. And once you get into into a community or into a craft, right, you start looking at it and saying like, wow, somebody probably spent thousands of hours working on those characters, or working on their letters to be able to just knock them out like that, right? There's lots of techniques and how to use paint so you can get those effects, right? You can't just like, this is a really funny thing, right? Is you just try to do it and you're like, wow, I'm not getting any results out of this. And this other person, like I really like this guy, Helio Bray, right? And he's always flaring and doing all these weird cuts and fills and things, and he makes it look so easy on Instagram.
Oh yeah.
It's like hypnotic, and you're like, wow. And then you go to try to do it, and I'm like, this just looks like a disaster comparatively. But but like to an outsider, it looks like a big mess, and they're just like, oh, that's just spray paint. So I'm just saying that outsider perspective, once you get in, I was trying to draw a parallel to the board that you're talking about, to like other things in that kind of craft or skill area versus art. Is once you get into it, you really can appreciate the art and the depth of it, versus when you're just glancing down the street and you're looking at a dumpster.
Yeah, I've had conversations with people about Helio Bray, and I'm like, yeah, check out his videos, but you're gonna be kind of discouraged because most of us can't do that shit, and most of us can't do it as effortlessly as he does. It's pretty interesting to watch that stuff come together and all the layers and things that
Yeah.
he does. That's pretty cool. I was also thinking about how I just came to this realization of how graffiti and how there's parallels with, we're pretty much just marketing. So like, as I'm kind of learning about marketing, I started thinking like, fuck, man, I've been marketing for a long time. I just didn't know that that's what I was doing. It's like this sort of, it's, with like social media marketing and stuff, you're using all these tools to target specific people. And whereas graffiti, at first I was thinking like, you're just putting your shit up, and like tens of thousands of people are going to drive by it on the freeway, or it's going to run on a train, and you're sort of not at first I was thinking you're not really targeting, but at the same time, it's kind of like you actually are, because you know the spots that graffiti writers are going to look at. So if you find a wall that's off the side of a freeway that's like, you know, you can just kind of see it between some trees, you know, and like as you go by or curve around this one thing, you'll catch a glimpse of this wall. It didn't ever occur to me that it's like that's sort of like targeted marketing, because you know pretty much only a graffiti writer in a passenger seat of a car is going to be like eyeballing all of those spots, and they'll see it and they're like, oh shit, I saw that, you know.
Yeah, circle back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to make all these connections to graffiti and how being a graffiti writer kind of translates over into your other aspects of your life. So I was wondering, like, do you have any carryover stuff, like as far as like the energy or whatever it is?
I want to explore that really quickly, because yeah, if we're talking about this marketing and getting attention conversation, right? So what you just described could be analogous to you're flipping through Instagram, right? And you're just scrolling around, and then you see something and you stop really quickly. Scroll stopper, right? It's going to get attention, and you have to have the right real estate, and it has to appeal to the right group of people, but it has to be memorable, right? So like a friend of ours always says, marketing is a game of memorization, right? And I think that is true once you start seeing that same flavor of thing or that style of thing, or that, you know, even if you're riffing on it and you're changing it, it has to be memorable and brandable, right? It has to repeat so you can memorize it. And we're kind of doing that thing, and we're trying to place it, you know, in somewhere that's important, but we're inundated with messages, just like you might be inundated with you know, different pictures or your distraction, right, when you're driving, right? It's like, how do you capture that person's attention? How do you stop them from scrolling and see what you've done, like see what you're offering, and then remember it, right? And yeah, I could definitely see the parallels. I could definitely see the parallels between that and you know, between marketing and graffiti in that sense. But in a more general sense, I have taken over that idea of, hey, the best way for me to get information and the best way for me to accelerate the way that I'm learning is by collaborating with people. So to like get out there and like not just show off and like, you know, trade tips or you know, be like, hey, here, I've learned how to do this, or like, did you see this, or did you see, you know, not just like riffing off of each other and getting better, but like the business equivalent of that energy, of like that relationship is like, yeah, doing collaborative products. Like, say my friend, he's a sculptor and I have a manufacturing company. It's like, can we make a machine sculpture? What would that look like? Like how are we going to get this product like in front of a bunch of people? How are we going to take over this Facebook group? How are we going to launch it? Like I feel like there's a lot of parallels to that, to running a little squad, you know, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
Are you talking about parallels of say like having a graffiti crew to collaborating?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, because like I think in my life, not just like personal life, but in business life, like I have a little small circle. Like I have my own little crew, and you know, people that I can show stuff that I'm working on. We have a lot of overlapping projects that we do, but you know, different skill sets, different things that we're better at. Like somebody might be, you know, they're better at motion graphics. They might be better at making you know, making contracts or reviewing or doing copywriting, right? You know, so like if you have that little group of people, it's easy to pull something together, plan something. But like if my videographer is trying to release a course on how to become a freelance videographer, like he has people in our squad that they do copywriting, they do all those other elements, right? So it's like we can learn from each other and we can grow and we can do things that we wouldn't be able to otherwise. We can kind of look out for each other. It's a lot of like parallel elements to that. That's what I think.
That's such a cool fucking eye opener because I had not made that connection until just right now, as far as like, because for me in my career, and you know how it is with being an entrepreneur when you say you bring on freelancers or something like that, and you have to deal with all those sort of frustrations that come up with dealing with hiring and all this kind of stuff, and missing deadlines, people messing up, and all this kind of weird stuff that happens. And at one point in my career, I was like, you know what, fuck this. I'm going to learn how to animate. I'm going to learn how to do all this shit myself. Yeah. And I ran my motion graphics business alone. So when I was talking to clients, like I always considered my company as an entity, and then there's me. So like whenever I was talking to somebody, even if it was just me doing the project, I was always saying we, not so much lying to them, but I had considered my company to be something separately. That's off topic. But the point is, until recently, I didn't see the value in having that collective around me until probably just before I joined the Arte Syndicate, and I started learning a lot more. And one of the reasons I joined Arte was because I wasn't surrounding myself with the kind of people that I felt like I needed to start collaborating with. I didn't have, I guess I didn't really have access, or I didn't think I did. I just didn't know where to find like I wouldn't know where to find you, or Alex or different
Sure.
people that I work with. And so back to the point you were making, I had started now building these connections and building, a small crew of people that I communicate with regularly to kind of help me in different aspects that I'm not good at. And until you brought that up, I had not considered the amount of growth that I made as a graffiti writer in the 90s. I joined a crew called MSK in 1993, and the amount of growth that I made from 93, I mean, honestly, from 93 to 94 was like exponential growth, almost like daily, because of the people that I was surrounding myself with. So not that I wasn't hanging around with cool people before, but as soon as I met Gank in 93, and he started mentoring me and showing me, this is how you operate in this yard, and this is how you do this, and this is how you do that. He introduced me to Eclipse, who started teaching me different letters and explaining things. And I remember being at like Motor Yard, and I pointed out a piece. I'm like, oh my God, that's so dope. I wish I could do stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, it is dope. But, you see, he didn't balance, like the C and the R don't really fit quite good together. And he was making all those connections for me. And it was like, I went from being pretty shitty to being pretty decent within like less than a year of time. And then the growth continued because of the things you're talking about. Like within our crew, there was like hardcore bombers that knew how to navigate the streets and knew how to do all this kind of stuff. They knew what gangs were in different areas. So like, don't go there. And they had a real key insight on how that kind of stuff worked. And then you had these other people that were more focused on pieces and doing these elaborate, crazy things, like the things that Saber was doing early on. I mean, things he's doing now is just totally crazy. But I remember seeing, I remember walking into the Venice Pavilion at times and being like, damn, that's so cool. There was one point where he did this one piece that was like, it was like his letters were leaning back, and he put a crack in the middle, and he had like light shining out of the cracks. And like at the time, like I hadn't seen anybody do that kind of thing. So I was able to see people innovating, and he also did that LA River piece. So it was just to get exposed to like people pushing themselves to the next level, and back to Gank and GK, and like he was more of like a street bomber, although he did like pieces and all this kind of stuff, but he brought like street bombing to like a whole nother level. So being around that kind of energy and that kind of thing, like you pick up little bits and pieces here and there. I wish I had made this connection a lot longer ago, because like I would have probably understood the value of having that kind of collaborative crew, so to speak, in my professional life. Because
Well, it's hard, right? Because it's just like finding the right fit in a crew for graffiti as well, right? It's not like you're just going to pop in there and everybody's going to say, "Hey, Mike, I love you. You know, you're the best." Like you might meet a couple people and you might talk to somebody and they're an asshole, right? And you might not be the right fit. And you're definitely not going to just go and be like, "I have a casual interest in graffiti. I want to join MSK." And this is like mistakes that people make. You know, we fall victim to a lot of tropes, right? So there's this trope of the lone inventor, the guy that's in this basement that's like coming up with this technology, or like the solo entrepreneur. And I'm like, let's look at what success looks like, right? And like, well, Elon Musk, he's a you know, this figurehead. He's doing it himself. I'm like, he was a part of the PayPal mafia, right? Look at all the people, Reid Hoffman, all these other people. You want to be like him? Well, he had a crew, right? Pick another person, and you can go through it, and they've put themselves in a situation where they fed off the energy and the knowledge of other people, and they even took their rivals and one-upped with their rivals, right? So like you can look at Gates and Jobs, right? It's additive. It's not a zero-sum game, right? Playing off of competition is also, you know, healthy, right? So we think one thing, and then success looks like another thing. But it's easy to go, like people go on Upwork, because I'm super bullish on partnerships to grow businesses, and we've gotten in this conversation before. But like I've had a lot of success with collaborations, and I've had a lot of success just sticking with what I'm decent at, and then saying like, who's like the world-class person at this that can help me do whatever wild thing I'm trying to do. But like everybody listens to that and then they think that they should go to like onlinejobs.ph or Upwork and just, you know, get a web developer, and then they do it and they get burned. And so they're like, I'll just do it myself. I'm like, you know, you might have to go through a couple copywriters. You might have to talk to a few local business people and be like, yeah, these people suck, right? these people are not great, right? We're not like matched on vibes. We're not matched on skill level, whatever it is, you know, values. But once you do find that person, you put them in your stable, and like they help the other people, you know, you help them, and then that little team grows. And that's why we're Red Blue Collective, because I think more than anything, we got to collect those people in our life that are like trying to be successful. They're trying to do something, even if it's like something wild and completely different. I mean, you never know what it's going to lead you to, and how somebody can be helpful, or how you know, you can help them, right? It might just be that they are high energy and they're doing something badass, and you're trying to do something badass. So like when you get together, you talk, you know, about boss shit together, right? You know, and you're just, and I don't know. For me, it's really important. It's just important to be around people that I can pass that back and forth with.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like I'm it's like a total mindset shift for me today, because like up until now I didn't make those connections, and there's a lot of connections that I wasn't really noticing. Like I knew aesthetically, being a graffiti writer, it ties directly into the type of art. Well, not art, the type of design that I do. So I went into commercial art, doing graphic design, motion graphics. And if you look at my stuff, like it doesn't look like graffiti, but at the same time, I'm drawn to like big, aggressive 3D letters, and there's like shiny shit on it, and there's shadows, and there's all this kind of stuff that you do in graffiti, but it's like a an interpretation of that energy, not so much like the actual aesthetic and the sort of like aggressive fighting, letters that look like they're battling each other kind of thing. But at the same time, there was a lot of parallels and a lot of things that I learned, just by doing graffiti. I hadn't realized that I was doing typography the whole time. I didn't consider graffiti typography. So like, I remember in college, we had this assignment and it was like, you had these sheets of paper and you were supposed to cut out each letter and then you were supposed to paste all the letters back up and space them properly, by hand. And so it was this like dreaded project in school and everybody's like, oh, everybody's going to be up all night. And like, I had already been doing graffiti for almost 10 years at the time. And it didn't even occur to me. I was like, okay, I'm doing it. And I put it all together and it took me like an hour and a half, and everybody else was going to have to work like 12 hours. And I was totally stressing out because I was like, man, I totally fucked this up because I can't figure out how to make this any better. Like, I can't spend 12 hours on this because I can't see anything wrong with it. And so I was like, all right, whatever, I'm going to go to bed. Everybody else was going to work all night. And when I put my stuff on the wall, the teacher goes and she draws, little pluses and minuses for like, you put too much space here and not enough space there. And not only did it only take me a couple hours to do, I had the least amount of marks on my shit. And it was just like, and it clicked for me. I was like, well, yeah, okay. Obviously I've been spacing letters for a long time and I kind of have an understanding of that. So there's a crossover there. But the other thing that you were saying that was kind of interesting is like how the business rivalries, like Steve Jobs and Microsoft or Apple Microsoft kind of thing is almost kind of like thinking about crew rivalries and like crew battles and one-upping each other and stuff. So I'm really going to start thinking about those parallels a lot more, because there's probably a lot that I can learn that I just didn't think about until now,
Yeah. I like the I get into deep discussions about competition with people because when we enter entrepreneurship in life, in a lot of areas, competition is viewed like as a zero sum, like there's a winner and a loser, like of a football game or something like that. But in entrepreneurship, I tell people competition is for losers, right? Because when we have a competitor, like we have a benchmark, right? And it's just like that crew thing. It's like if somebody puts out something that's amazing, like you're not just going to say, I'm going to give up. You're like, okay, now that's the new benchmark. Like now we've got to find a better location. We've got to come up with something better. We have to, it's additive and it's cumulative over time. So like, success is like that with the right group of people as well in your circle, right? And it's true outside of your circle. So just to like one more kind of cultural parallel, the wrong group of people, you say you have the wrong group of friends and you go and you're saying, hey, I have this issue in my business, this and this and this is happening. The right group of people is going to say, hey, here's my experience, or here's a friend to talk to, or that's very interesting. And they're going to look at it as to try to help you, give you perspective, maybe jump in and solve a problem for you. The wrong group of people is going to think that you're bragging, right? That you're like humble bragging about your problems, right? And so that negativity and positivity, when you are surrounded by the right, with the right crew, it's really distinct. It's very distinct. So
yeah, that's cool. There's also like inner crew competition. Like when you see the people on your team doing better, it kind of forces you to level up your shit too.
Yeah.
So I was like talking about that a little bit too when you're surrounding yourself with the wrong people. And I can't remember what episode we talked about it, but it was kind of like being very careful about the crew that you join and, understanding there's parallels and there's obviously some differences, but like if you join the wrong crew, you're adopting all of that crew's issues or their notoriety or both most likely, or
Sure.
Not most likely, but that's how it is. So like
Yeah.
if you
That's the whole
if you
point, right?
decide to start writing this acronym next to your name, anybody that doesn't like that crew doesn't like you now, you know. So I wonder. I know you don't really. I guess if you're talking about a crew as a company, there may be those kind of things, but like in terms of guilt by association, I wonder how much of that crosses over into business, because I don't really have. I'm
Well, I
only
mean,
this year really networking like I should have been, you know, for the last decade or.
it's a little bit like Arte or another group. I mean, there's certainly smaller masterminds that are pretty well known, and it's you're saying like, hey, I'm a part of this group. So in somewhat your brand becomes identified with what that is, and since a brand is what other people say about you, not what you say about yourself, like it's all perception, it's not objective reality, it's subjective reality. So like, yeah, if somebody does something that is that's wrong, like you're identified with that, and you can see that with like broader social groups for sure, right? And certainly with close knit, crews. So your little circle. So I call it a winner's circle. The idea is like when your circle wins, you win, right? So everyone in your circle, if anybody wins, you all win, because we're bringing like, the story of Prometheus, right? It's like when somebody figures something out, it's like they're bringing the fire to the group, and we all
Yeah.
win, right? And so there's that positive element, but there's that branding element to it as well. So yeah, you write the acronym after your work, you are putting the brand stamp. So
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. Like the branding association too. There's a whole bunch of stuff I'm gonna have to start really thinking about more.
well, this is one of the things I really like about your podcast, is because it combines two things that I really like, and it's so thoughtful. So you're bringing all of the thoughtful elements that we talk about, like in Arte, or you see in personal development, and then couching it in terms of graffiti. So I'm like, oh, I definitely see how this kind of tall poppy syndrome, right? It's like, crab pot syndrome. It's like this. That's the opposite of leveling each other up and forming a real community. And you talk about, so you bring one of those personal development topics and then frame it in an art community or in graffiti. And I'm like, this is really interesting. This is really
I
different,
appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
very distinct.
sometimes when I'm trying to come up with stuff, I'm like, you know, I have to catch myself because I think like, ah, man, you know, so and so already covered this and so already covered that, but it's like, well, yeah, but they didn't really pick and choose what stuff is applicable to this culture. You know, that's kind of what Cub and I set out to do in the very beginning, which was to, because the stuff that we or I'm still battling with that because he's still part of the thing, even though he's not like physically here. But um, what we intended to do is obviously the amount of information I absorb is a fraction. I mean, it's a fraction of what I absorb is shared via that podcast. You know, it's like most
Sure.
of it, most of it I keep or I fucking forget. Like, you know, I mean, there's only so much stuff you can remember, but
I like
uh,
that.
yeah. So it's it's kind of a struggle in a sense, and I'm still learning. And you know, it's like 30 episodes or 31 episodes so far. So I don't know. We'll see how much further it goes. But I think like conversations like this will be interesting to bring in
Mhm.
because you're bringing in a whole nother perspective. So I don't know. I want to try to keep stuff like that going.
Yeah. I have the interview, and then I do an episode or a couple episodes that are kind of breaking down after it's, soaked into my thick skull. I'm like, yeah, okay, so she said this, and it took a few days, and I listened to it again, and it really clicked with this other lesson. So then I do this solo episode after that kind of unpacks it and puts it more into my audience's vocabulary or into my own vocabulary versus the the guests, the guest story. But I think it's interesting, yeah, because it's one of the reasons why I'm really liking Clubhouse right now. So not to destroy the show and derail it with talk about Clubhouse, but
It's all good. I'm trying to get some people over there anyway.
But it's like there's a lot of like silly puffery, but I'm like, have you guys been on the internet? This is pretty much how the internet works, right? But what I really like about it is that there's very little control that you have in the background and demographics and like state and status of people that come into the room. So like people that ask questions, they have their own shit, their own thing that they're trying to do, and it's like totally disconnected from what I'm trying to do, right? So they're like, hey, I'm trying to start this T-shirt business for this group of people. I'm like, this is awesome. This is totally random, and they bring their own values and their own culture and their own thoughts to it, and then working through those problems with them. I'm like, it that discussion has so much value, right? Because it has to be translated from like what I'm doing or what I know into like what they're doing and what they're trying to do. And then the next person has a completely different thing that they're doing and a completely different background. So I like that. I like having that diverse experience and background, because it forces you to think, to translate an idea.
Yeah, I'm digging Clubhouse for sure. I made a post about trying to do a little graffiti meetup, and it turned out to be like, it was me, the guitarist of a band called Strife. I used to be in a band called Strife. They're still around. I was in there for like a year, way back. It was me, him, and this kid that works for me. We were just in a room together, just kind of chopping it up a little bit. But Andrew actually gave me an idea for an episode that I'm going to record. But so I would like more people, more graffiti writers to get on there, because I think there could be some interesting discussion to be had. And then another thing that I thought, it could either be good or bad. It just sort of depends. Like, so if you have a room where graffiti writers are discussing stuff, if it's a public room, and some people will like this idea and some will hate it. But like, if you have a public room and you're discussing graffiti, it sort of gives people an option to, so like say a soccer mom's like, I don't know shit about graffiti, but let me just listen to this conversation that she would never be able to listen to. And I've gotten to listen to those kind of conversations that, like, there was some rooms that I was in that I was like, this room and just the topic of the room is obviously, this is not directed at me at all, but I want to hear this conversation. So you're in there and you're getting to sit at a table that you don't normally get to sit at, I find that really interesting. And the other thing that's pretty cool is like, sometimes you'll see a name pop up and you're like, oh shit. Like, the author of the book, Tiny Habits. Like, I love that book. And so I got to go in there and hear him talk about things, So it's like, there's a lot of cool stuff that happens on there. I see a lot of good things potentially happening with Clubhouse for sure.
Yeah, I've connected with a lot of people, because the one thing about it being audio only is that it's pretty hard to fake knowledge when you have to spit it out on the fly based on a random question or conversation. So people that you would think like, this is the this is the boss right here, this person knows everything, they end up not really being able to deliver that information, at least on the fly, in a non-curated way, right? And then just some random person, they'll just start spitting knowledge. I'm like, I'm following this person, I got to follow him on Instagram, this is ridiculous. And that's led to some really good conversations and a lot of podcast bookings though.
Oh, really? That's cool. I've been going on the podcast ones and trying to learn and stuff, and I've been getting a lot of good information from that, like public speaking and shit, because I want to learn how to just be better at, I don't know, like better at speaking and communicating and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty interesting. I'm even on there like with people are talking about all kinds of way out, like astral projection and all kinds of stuff. I'm like, Well, that's cool, man. I have some trippy shit that's happened, and I've gotten to have like say, "Hey, Liz, this happened to me once," like, and explain it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you know," I don't know. I want to get too far into that, but
I love it.
they're explaining to me what they believe happened and shit like
Yeah,
that. So there's like a lot of interesting stuff there.
yeah, yeah.
That's really
Totally,
cool.
totally wild. See, I did end up derailing our conversation with Clubhouse.
It's
Talking
all
so,
good.
I don't know.
Hey, it's all good. Was there we're about 45 minutes in. Was there any other topics you were hoping to talk about?
Um, like I think it would be interesting to just talk about the intersection, and this is a broad conversation too. It's just the intersection of like art and commerce, like feelings around working on something and selling it. Because um, I I do know a lot of artists, and like I said, my uh, family of artists. So I've seen a lot of difficulty in people getting out there, and then it's not just imposter syndrome, but there's something about money itself that makes it's like, am, is what I'm doing worth somebody paying for it? It's like, well, I just did it. Like, oh, I just did it with a pen, or I just drew this up with a pencil, and it just took me a day. So like, why should it cost money? I'm like, if you go, I go to Art Basel every year in Miami, and you can see paintings that are by masters that they've come out of a private collection. They're going to be there that week at a booth, and then somebody's going to buy them off the floor in that booth, and they'll never be in an art book or anything. And they're $50 million painting you can get 1 foot away from. But you also just see things that people are working on. You realize like, it puts like money into a different perspective, I guess, is my point. Is that there's somebody out there that is putting in the same amount of work, that has found an audience that enjoys their story and what they're trying to do, and they've made a go of it. They've made a life out of it, or a very good life out of it. And it's interesting to see people who want to make that leap. But what's like your perspective on what prevents people? Because some people do amazing work, right? And they just never, they're like, I wish that I could, or I want to, or I'm trying to, instead of just saying like, hey, Callie, I have this thing, it's $50. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of shied away from selling my artwork. It wasn't really something I was interested in doing.
yeah,
But as far as like some of the things that I see, and I just had a conversation with a guy about this, and there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. And I know that some people think like, you'll see somebody say, they'll spray paint a tag on a stop sign and they'll sell it for like $500 or something, and everybody's like, holy shit, like, how is he charging that much for that? And it's like, whatever it is. And it's kind of like, you could look at it from two sides. It's kind of like, yeah, you just caught a tag on a stop sign and it's whatever. I just made that up, like that number. I don't have any specifics, but
somebody's done it though.
somebody has done it. Yeah. So, but at the same time, it's kind of like, you can look at it two ways. Like, so people are saying like, oh, well, he's trying to make money off the culture and this and that and the other. And it's kind of, but then the way I look at it is like, look, the thing is worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. So if it's like somebody's willing to give you $1 million to take a shit on a fucking stop sign or whatever it is, or catch a tag, or then that's what it's worth. I mean, somebody's willing to buy that, and it's like, if you don't think it's worth that, then don't buy it, And then the other thing that I was thinking about with this guy that I was having a conversation with, he was saying, I'm trying to sell these drawings, and I don't have my phone with me, or I'd pull his name up so I could mention his name. It's slipping my mind right now, but he's saying, I'm trying to sell these drawings. I give a lot of drawings away, but I also kind of want to make some money off my art. And I would hit somebody's black book for free. So why should I sell this thing? Or is it cheesy to sell this drawing? And I was like, look, man, your time is worth more than any amount of money. You know, if somebody said, "Hey, I'll give you $500, but you're gonna die 6 hours earlier," I'd be like, "Dude, I'm not doing that. That's not it's not a good trade off." You know what I mean? So like, and that, well, that's extreme, but it's sort of like you're still putting your time into it, and your time is worth something. But then you also have to think like the amount of time that it took you to be able to do that, like the amount of countless hours that it took. Like even if you said back to the stop sign thing, if you caught a tag on it, some dude off the street can't just write a tag on a stop sign and sell it for $500. Like there's a countless amount of hours of whatever it is they had to do to make that tag mean what it means to where somebody would want that. So
to make your brand be where it is, to have the connections and the like acknowledgement. So like it's like my definition of cool, right? People, because I say my personal mission is to make cool shit, right? And my definition of cool is somebody else has to think that it's good. It's not like a personal validation thing. It's validated by like the market, you know, like, does Mike think it's cool? Does this group of people buy my idea? If I come up with an idea, is it good? Like somebody else gets to decide that. But if you want to sell that stop sign, it has to be an exchange of value. And if you're selling garbage, eventually, you know, people are gonna feel like that dude's selling garbage, right?
Yeah.
So, well, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, do you agree with that? I mean, that's just my opinion in terms of something is worth what people are willing to pay to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's something that my dad would always say about collectibles, because you know you get the little book that says how much it's worth, and he's like, it's only worth what somebody is willing to pay for it. So like, could you actually sell that thing for that amount? And I think that is definitely one component of it, is like, you know, the market dictates what something's worth, not you. And we often like downgrade what our own value and potential is because we feel like bad, or we feel like money, you know, it's the stupid thing that I say all the time is like, money isn't the mission, money makes the mission possible, right? I want to live a life that looks like this. I'm probably going to have to get paid somehow. But it's not because I need money. It's because I need money to be able to do what I want to do, right? Yeah. And I think that's one element of it. It's the other element of it is like, if we want to spread an idea, or we want to spread a brand or a culture, right? We have to give people something. That's the thing. It's like, and we have to make sure that they're going to value it. And people tend to value things that they pay for. I mean, you know, you can break it down in different ways, but it just happens to be demonstrably true. But I have a friend who's an artist, and he makes those CNC machine sculptures, right? And they're pretty expensive. And when I first met him, I was like, you need to make something that people can afford, right? And for him, that's just something that's under $1,000. And he's like, you know, I can make these for fun, but I make the big ones. And the idea is like, if we want, his mission is to proliferate the concept of that medium being art. That's like his personal mission. And I'm like, well, to be able to push that mission for people to agree with you, they have to get your art, right? So like, it doesn't matter if it's $5 or $500 or $50,000 or whatever, like, for that to be true, your mission to be true, like, we have to actually engage in commerce with them. In that case, it's like, we have to get it into people's hands. We have to get it into museums, which he's done a really fantastic job over the past 4 or 5 years doing. But it's like, there's a group of people who are out there that are demanding that they take part, or that they support what you're trying to do. And when you find somebody in the comments saying, got to find your super fans, it's pretty much right. There's people that are huge fans, and we'll just pick on graffiti because that's what we're kind of broadly talking about. There's people that are huge fans conceptually of the culture, but they're not a member of the culture, or they're tangentially related to the culture, and they just want to support it or feel like some connection to it or community to it. And if you can't actually do it, maybe that looks like supporting monetarily, right?
Yeah, or
And
buying a piece to have in your house or
yeah, I mean,
stuff
like,
like that.
like for me, I appreciate people that are putting the work into it. So if somebody is selling something, I I don't feel like it's a donation. I feel like it's an equitable exchange of value. But I like the fact that I know the money is going towards art instead of going towards, like, broadly, like going towards $1 billion corporation or something like that. So
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good way to look at it. Um, yeah, I mean, I've had people ask me, oh, do you ever sell your art? And I always just like totally undersold it. I'm like, yeah, just give me like $50, and then I look at it, I'm like, I just made $10 an hour off of that thing, It's just sort of like I get into my head like, oh, it's just something I was gonna do anyway. But I I really don't think that's the right way to look at it. But at the same time, I'm not trying to pursue that as a I do as far as like art, making money off of art, commercial art seemed like just a way more, um, I don't want to say easy, but it was more logical. I don't even know what the word is, but it just sort of like, there's clients out there that need certain things, and I can make art that fits that, whatever it is. So if it's a movie title or a title for their TV show, and there's it made a lot more sense to me to pursue that route rather than making art and hoping somebody would find it valuable enough to
there's
pay
a
for it.
there's like a clear moral division as well, because it's artistic and creative, but it's not art, right? It's not like
Yeah.
fine art. So you don't have to draw a line in your mind of like, here's where my passion is, and then this is where my business is. They're really divisible at that point. But if they were to start spreading, then we have to start making like value decisions based on, like, what is my intent, what am I trying to do, what am I trying to support. And that's where we get into like all these weird conversations. Everybody has a different perspective on it, and I think that they should, right? Because you want to feel good about what you're doing, especially if it's your passion. But I don't know. It, like I said, that's like a much broader conversation
Yeah.
again. But I think it's something worth having. So, but yeah, just my quick thoughts on that.
Cool. Well, I don't
Yeah.
think I have anything else. Do you have anything else?
Now let's wrap it up. I appreciate being on. This is really cool. So
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, man. It was it's something I hope to I plan to continue doing. And like, although you do have experience in the graffiti culture and the art form, I want to try to bring on different perspectives and just sort of see how we can tie all that stuff together. And I really appreciate your perspective on all that.
thanks, man. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
How do we stop this thing? Do you stop
We,
it on your?
you just go like this.